I got my I was able to kind of through medical, like they call it medically assisted maintenance, like methadone. I was able to get off of drugs, off of street drugs, but didn't know kind of work about overcoming what caused me to be a drug addict. I was able to work. I started tattooing. I developed um sound and stable routines. I For 10 years I was or not 10 years, about 7 years I was tattooing full time, working, painting very little, graph. I was just so obsessed with like tattooing. I loved it. Loved the machines and all. It was like learning about something new again, and I was so into it. I revere that time. It's so fond for me. Like just like to be able to like dissect everything about something, and to really get into like the grit and the like I don't know. It was just like a world I was, a lot of people, I feel like they get into tattoos as a way of like being edgy or maybe like kind of like rebelling, but to me and like sort of my peers, tattooing was like a way to straighten out. Like tattooing offered me a foundation in which to gain employment, to like do something that wasn't illegal for once. It was the first honest, I mean, really, I mean, I had, done some things, but it was the first job I really had where it was like a 9 to 5, a daily grind type thing, and I had already accumulated a long list of fucking criminal history. I wasn't really applicable to get any other employment that was, so it offered me a very good regiment of like self improvement. And I moved to New York as a tattooer. Um, but I also started doing graffiti again. So after that, like let's call it a 5 year gap of not really doing too much graph, but solid tattooing. Um, I moved to New York and I started working tattooing in Bed Stuy. That was really fun, but I started doing a lot of graph, and that was a big reason I moved to New York. Is like I was like I got out of the Southwest. I was just I just wasn't too thrilled with being isolated, you know. Um and my parents died, so like I didn't have an attachment. So it was time to move, and I did, and started doing a lot of street graph, and I just sort of I felt like it was kind of like when I kind of like moving to San Francisco, different because I had already kind of like I felt like it was kind of like a comeback, or it was like my second round or something. But like um I ended up just doing a lot of like street stuff, and meeting a lot of cool people that were younger, that were really active, but still had kind of, I feel like very like recognizable sort of like graph would maybe blow up a little bit after that, but like still it was still really grounded towards like it was real familiar to me still. And there was still old graffiti, stuff wasn't really buffed like a whole lot. I moved to Bushwick, like on Gates Ave and stuff, and like Broadway and Gates, and like that was cool to see like a lot of like local like graphs still and like spots, so like I got really into that. So yeah, that was how I ended up moving to New York, is like I was tattooing, and like I wanted to start doing graffiti again, so I or be more active, so I came here. um And then after a few years of that, it would be 3 years of being in New York. So like I ended up seeing a lot of like little like overspray like on the window on the subway where like I could see that like there was a there was graft there. They like didn't clean it all the way, but you could just see speckles. And I started seeing it often, and I'm like, this is like someone did it, you know. And I hadn't done like transit graph in like a good ten years at least, like really. Yeah, around, yeah, about that. And I decided to like, and no one wanted to touch it. People had already been busted and like gotten some serious like charges and time. Like I felt like all my street rider friends were like, they're kind of on some like don't touch those things because it's a career ender, kind of. But I was like, I just started looking and I started reading these, finding any old interviews I could get out of like old graffiti. Like there was a website and like it was old. It was from like the 90s. It had all the like weird animated like letters that were like going up and down the screen and stuff. And I looked on there and it was like form. They must have just sent emails to people because the questions were the same. Like, what year did you start writing? And then it turned into what was your favorite spot to paint? And these were all subway riders, so I just wrote them all down. And then I went and one night I was like, I'm just gonna go check. I went to Utica on the 4 line, and that was my local layup. Like that's where I lived by. And I went walking down, jumped onto the tracks, walked down, and I'm seeing like I'd never been in there like that, like in one like that really. And I'm walking around. I see the little like staircase, and I don't see no. I'm like, there's no way there's any trains in here. I didn't see nothing, but I was on the wrong. Jumped off the platform on the 3 line. You got to go down to the 4, and so I'm walking, and I see one of these little staircases with the yellow trim, and I'm like, yo, I'm gonna jump in there and see these tags. I see like all these like Smith tags, like Ghost, Comet, Blade, and I'm like, damn, I'm looking at all these tags, and I'm thinking this isn't the place, but at least I'm seeing these tags. And then I go down the stairs and I pop out, and what do I see but like I hear the hum of like a train engine idling, and I see the windows in the silver, and I'm like, it just took the breath out of me. I was like, I couldn't believe it, and I was like, I'd been waiting so long for that moment. And I had already done a couple subways in New York, but it was back when someone showed me how to do it. They took me to like a end station layup type thing, and we're like, all right, you got, it's spastic real quick because they're telling me you only got like, whatever, 6 or 7 minutes. So I'm spastic. This time I was like, I'm about to spend my time with this train, and whatever happens, happens. I, at that time you're thinking the Vandal Squad is gonna pop out of midair and jump on you, Like you realize that's how I felt. Like once you apply that paint, like they're gonna start parachuting out of the sky. That was kind of the vibe. So I'm I'm just taking my time and like I did just like I'll never forget that piece. It was just a real simple like and I used a word that was like real similar to my tag, like, and it looked like my graph, but it said a different name. And like I liked that name. I felt like it like it was just like an important name to me. It was like a word that was like had some depth to it. I liked that name. Like cry to me was like it was just appropriate, and like I could see gray in it, you know? And And I did that piece, and then I took photos, but then the next day, like, I'm looking on Instagram, and like, really there wasn't a whole lot of trains getting, like, it wasn't common, but all of a sudden someone catches this thing on like 192nd Street or something. So that thing went through the system, like, and from then on I was like, yo, there's something. This is the fact that it's like people saw it and someone got a photo and it reached me back and it's running. It's got, it's in a station on a platform that had value to me. That had like a lot of value. Like that that got me that got me active, you know? It made me realize that this mattered to me. This was something that name, that word, and that experience was so dear to me that I was going to continue this. And I kept going. I kept doing a lot of panels, and it was all by myself. Um, Mainly because I didn't want to bring. I had just heard so many horror stories, and I had no one to like guide me, that I didn't want to offer any kind of like telling someone else to go do it. Cause like if this shit like fuck someone's whole life up, like I just so I went by myself and I would meditate with those pieces. Like I just would take my time, and like I just felt like the experience was so important to me that like I wasn't gonna rush or like I just wanted to be with the piece for a minute and like take my photo and just enjoy my time. Even if each one was the only one I ever did again, that was fine. I'm not gonna scaredly rush through something real quick and run off. Like I wanted to like absorb these experiences, because it was like the that was so, like, we talked earlier about how like what has kept you going, like, so all that before what I said, like now at this point it was each one of those pieces was like, if each one of those pieces on the New York subway was the last thing I ever did, I was fine. That was fine with me. Like, and I was going to experience it. I mean, I'm talking about like the every spot I did too. Like I wasn't up against a wall. I wouldn't paint where there's pillars. If I painted a spot, and I had a lot of them to myself, I was going to be able to stand back, look at the piece, take good photos with a flash, but still, and experience the piece, because I wasn't seeing any subway graphs. So like it was just, yeah. So nothing mattered besides, to me, that might as well have been church at the time for me. That was me absorbing like this all encompassing like experience. And um I kept doing it, and no regrets at all for that. Like,
What came of that with law enforcement?
so as I continued, that so apparently, like, my time frame is a little bit weird, but like it's kind of blurry. I wasn't like mile marking each thing. I wasn't dating the thing. But apparently it was a 2 year like process. Um Estimated about 52, the charges reflected 52 large graffiti incidents on the New York subway. Um Large graffiti just means like a throw up or a piece or a whole car, something besides a tag. Um I don't know. Some of those might have been I was with someone, because I did eventually connect with two people that I would go with. Um and so some of those might have been, there was two panels, and then they threw that into my roster. I don't know. I would have to go back and look. Um I wasn't counting, but I believe it to be somewhat around between 30 and 50 like solid panel pieces, and a handful of whole cars as well. Um, so I went painting with some people, and they had been active with like they were more in the scene. I was kind of like, I had my street career, I had my European stuff, I had San Francisco, New York streets, but as far as New York subways, I was doing my own investigating and my own reconnaissance and going on my own, and like I was very isolated. I didn't know anyone. I don't even think someone could have told on me if they wanted to, because I wasn't communicating. Um, but the guys I went with, they had been a little more in the scene of the transit graffiti scene, and that led to some people I associated with getting investigated, and ended up, the Vandal Squad apparently is, looking through the window with binoculars for 2 weeks, digging through garbage looking for sketches. I didn't draw graffiti, especially cry graffiti. Didn't make stickers. Um, I just would do the graph when it was all, I wouldn't plan it out. I would just do it and stuff. And so I didn't have a lot of evidence, but they came they came and raided one of my associates' houses, and they ended up finding some in there, and I kind of and you know what, the dude held it down like straight up, like he ended up having to do a little bit of prison for the, not even just a little, what some would consider a lot, for that. But in ways I feel guilty, because I feel like, because he had the I feel, and you know what, the dude, what, he lived in a different state that allowed you to purchase these things. He moved to New York. In that moving truck there was some and you know he wasn't there was nothing to it besides that. But state laws are state laws. um so I think during that investigation, and you know what, whether it was sloppiness or people telling, there was definitely like a culprit to like the reason that I and my associates ended up getting investigated. I can't say, because unfortunately, you know becoming a confidential informant doesn't require that you necessarily go on paper and testify. You can just drop. You can just say so and so did this, or this guy. You can just say hearsay, and they can use it. And so that's what happened. Um, so my two associates, the two people I was pretty fairly active with, ended up getting raided within a few weeks apart. They were actually residing in the same place, and I had been in and out of that place a lot, so I knew they were coming. Uh, when they did arrive, there was nothing of any sort of crucial evidence in my house. But I went out to get coffee, and these guys were, you know, I hear my name and I look, and here comes 6 or 7 guys in plain clothes, with the little ball chain around their neck. You know, it's not really a good situation when they're not in uniform. Like, that's kind of like I knew that this was a process that I knew it was coming, but still it sucked. um, so they had taken me in, and the lieutenant, or whatever, I don't know what his position was, but the head of the Vandal Squad, which was Nino Navarro at the time, he had a he had a book, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna show you this book. I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna show you a bunch of stuff, and you're gonna tell me what you're responsible for. And at the time, I'm just like, I already knew I wasn't gonna say nothing at all. I wasn't not gonna. I I want. I regret not seeing that book because I bet there was some really good stuff in it and good photos that I had never seen of my own stuff. But I wasn't even gonna look in that book and have my expression change. You know, um, and I told him, don't even open that book because I need a lawyer. I'm not going to tell you. I don't have anything to say to you. And they took me to jail. You know, he's saying, oh, if you tell us this and that, you'll be out of here in 5 minutes. Just tell us what you did. And it's funny because they use wording in such a way that I would have been out of there in 5 minutes, and I was out of there in 5 minutes, but I was out of there en route to the police station. I wasn't going back in my house in 5 minutes, and no matter what I said was not going to make that happen. But if, people, they had been surviving for years off telling street writers, like, all you got to do is confess to this and you'll go home right now, or whatever, whatever. They were actually mad on the way there. They're like, they had to transport me. And I hear the two guys talking the head of the vandal squad stayed there to search my house, to keep ransacking my house. And the other guys are like, man, he's like, well, I don't see why people don't talk anymore, man. Like, that I lawyered up. These guys were like, they were talking amongst themselves. They had given up on me. Like, there was no like discussion between me and them, but they were talking amongst each other, like kind of venting about the fact that people don't tell anymore. That shit was crazy to me, you know? But it's telling on yourself. Like, they never I mean, I don't know about, I had heard street stories of, the street. There's two vandal squads too. There's like what they call graffiti, and then there's like the transit. The graffiti vandal squad, they sit in front of scrapyard. They were talking about that too, right in front of me. That they're like, thank God we're not in graffiti no more. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, and this wasn't even those two. This was like some guys that came in when I was in holding in the vandal squad transit little holding cell. Which, like, I'm not gonna lie, man, like, that experience, even that part of it wasn't like, it was still like kind of, it meant something to me. Like, it sucked, and I didn't want to be there, but like, for what it's worth, like, it entered my mind of like, damn, I wonder what like subway legends have been sitting right here. And it was old, it was bars still, it wasn't glass, it was like, there's bars, and I'm watching these guys processing my evidence through the bars, and they're like, they went out and celebrated by a pizza party, that they got me and stuff, and like, they didn't hate me either. Like, as much as I wanted it to be like a fuck those guys, like, fuck you, and you hear stories of like people like spitting on the vandal squad and them beating you up and all that. I feel like they knew I was like, I had been around. I wasn't a kid. They knew I had a whole nother career doing graph. They knew I had been, they were kind of like, and this was already, I was like already Mirandized, and I wasn't going to talk. And but they were kind of like being like, oh yeah, he's like, they didn't hate me. Like, the only thing they did that kind of, I guess was a little misleading, was the fact that like, I was like, I pulled the dude aside, and I was like, yo, just when they released me from the vandal squad to the tombs to Manhattan. And I was like, yo, you're not going to put me on like, we don't got to go to the paper and the news and stuff, right? And he's like, nah, you're good. I said, I'm a nobody, And he they put me in the news. My brother, who's, I've never really discussed this or not, like, discussed this before, but like, my brother is a police officer the whole time. my blood brother is like a cop. And I called him like just to see what was going on, or something. And he's like, yeah, he's talking about he saw it in the LA Times. Like, so this was like, I think it's online. They like maybe syndicate this like story to like multiple different, but he's reading it on. He's like, yeah, you made national news for the graffiti. He knew I wrote. I don't I don't think he was too thrilled about me doing subways. Like, he's reading it as like that I, had like a 2-year campaign against the New York subway. But he knows what it is. He knows I wasn't breaking windows and stuff. He knows enough about graffiti to know that like there's merit to it, whether he agrees with it or not, which he doesn't. Um he wasn't ashamed of me. He just was concerned, you know. Um so yeah, that was luckily though, the outcome of that was that like they didn't have really any evidence. They might have known or assumed or figured or taken pictures of me hanging out with associated people that were up along with me. They knew that I shoplifted a lot. He's like, yeah, we've been following you. We know you steal all day long. They probably knew I was buying drugs because at that point, halfway between the first year, I was about midway through that the cry graffiti, I started using um, heroin again. Um, I chalked that up to like not having any recovery. I mean, the whole time I was like tattooing, I was clean, I was on methadone. I wasn't getting to the root of like what it was about me that made me consume drugs to the point of complete and total devastation of life, building my life up 2 different times. Well, this, I guess, building my life up from complete shambles, losing everything, building it up to having, you know, a good amount of money in the bank, a good job. I'm painting, I'm working tattoo all day. I had a girlfriend that, was doing in a different field of occupation that was very esteemed. I'm not going to get into that, to what it was, but I had kind of like sort of, I felt like I had kind of arrived, but this tricky part about addiction is, for me especially, it strikes. You always think of addicts as being desperate or like so hurt, or they've been through so much that drugs were the only place that they could turn. But for me, it 2 different times it started at a point where I was like, oh, I've finally accomplished these passions in my life. I can partake in celebrating. And I celebrated in the ways that I knew how. And those, unfortunately, the nature of opiates are, they create, regardless of what your intentions are at first, opiates will, through continued usage of them, will create dependency in which you cannot function without these substances. Period. Whether they have a cute name or they're called perkies or whatever, or lean, opiates will take you down, and the nature of opiates is creating habit that you cannot abstain from without withdrawal and sickness. So I So and they don't always hit when you're down. You can be at the top of your game, and you can, it took me down from a very high place 2 different times, you know, and goals that I had worked very hard to achieve were toppled by these substances. Um,
The first time that you started using, you told me it was through pills, and you didn't really understand what was going on. What about the second time?
the second time, I had already been a seasoned user of intravenous drugs. During the time in England, I had been injecting heroin and crack for a year and a half. Continued to do that for about another year. So, like, by the time and then I stopped I stopped injecting crack and started injecting, and then reduced it to heroin, then got on methadone and got my life together, sort of, but like I wasn't doing any sort of therapy. Just, it's like if you're addicted to alcohol, and instead of whiskey, you compromise and you drink 1 can of light beer in the morning, and you don't get, you can go to work or whatever. That was kind of how methadone was. You're still around the same crowd. You're still inebriated. You're just, compared to the extremity of chaotic usage, which is what addiction, that's kind of how it's defined. It was stable usage, and I was able to clean up. So my starting point in this round was, I was on methadone. I had started taking some Xanax as well, which I was prescribed Xanax. So, like, to me, I had rationalized that as like just, I see, addiction's so weird because, like, I had already destroyed my whole life, but I thought I wasn't. The Xanax was, looking back on it, it was so extreme as far as like compromising. Like, dude, you'll forget. So, like, luckily I have a really vivid memory, but like there's certain things that, like, I don't know. I feel like it's once again, that's another drug. It's Xannies. Is that like these drugs with like cute names and stuff that are idealized because they're catchy sounding. People don't realize, like, benzodiazepines, which is the Valium, Klonopin, Xanax, that stuff, man, like, it is habit forming and addictive, and you will not be able to function without it if you develop a habit with it, which happens very quick. Regardless of how many rappers, might like mention these things and stuff. Um,
How quick would you say the habit forms?
I think with opiates, it's a lot more rapid. With Xanax, I never really noticed. I didn't. To me, that was like a garnish. That was the side dish. Like, I went into a doctor who's now in prison, and started getting painkillers early on in that whole spree, and he would give me Xanax or Valium, and to me, that he just threw that in there. That was almost like so for me, I didn't really care about that because it kind of made me sleepy. But the opiates are habit forming. I think the benzos, which is all the Xanax type drugs, they take a little longer, and you're not vomiting and stuff, but it's psychologically crazy to detox from. It's like you can start going into psychosis. I remember, like, I at one point in my my time as writing Cry, I the I remember going to look at a spot, and I didn't have Xanax, and I went to go check out City Hall to just peep it one day, and I was like the and it was during the day, but like car lights were super bright, and like there was like an aura, and I was having like a panic attack, and I didn't even realize that was Xanax withdrawal. And the problem was with me is like I had already been so deep into to drug use prior, and I had been off of it for 7 years. And then one day, like I said, I had everything going. Um, really tumultuous, bad relationship, um, and highly demanding bad relationship, which was exhaustive. I think part of my, and this is fully my problem, full accountability, but part of my dive back into drugs was spiteful. I was going to like, I wanted something that was counter or outside of this codependent, fucked up relationship I had. I was seeking me time, so to speak, and did it the way I knew how. And that was to one day, I was working in Bed-Stuy, uh, tattooing, and for 2 years straight, I did never, drugs were not even in my, like, they were not on my radar in any way. But one day I realized that they were selling, that right outside the door was the guy I'd seen every day for 2 years. Talk to him, give him water. He would sell DVDs, and I realized that he wasn't just selling DVDs; he was selling heroin. And one day, I decided to go grab some, and I went to Walgreens and bought needles and fucking shot that shit up. I didn't even sniff it or nothing. Like, I'm just saying, like, but to me, like, because I had already had such a huge problem in the past with injecting a mixture of crack and heroin, which is a speedball. I thought, like, as long as I don't put cocaine in it, it's gonna be all right. And I'm on methadone, so like, to me it was recreational, which is fucking crazy. Looking back as a fully sober individual now, like like it just seems so odd to me that like I rationalized injecting heroin and saying it was gonna be okay since I didn't put coke in it. Like, but that was where I was at the time, and I accept those, um I accept the maybe a little bit skewed perspective, but looking back on it, as naive as it was still a necessary step in my trajectory. So I was still painting a lot during the time, started injecting. Um, but through that whole process, I kept my bearings about me and was staunchly committed to the fact that I wasn't going to inject cocaine again or crack. And so comparative to the first bout with addiction, I was like, "Oh, I'm all right," you know. Um, then I so by the time the Vandal Squad did come get me, I would say it's weird because I almost wanted to get caught. Like towards the end, I was I was almost like thinking I knew how it was going to end, but I was picturing like that I would get caught in the act and all that, you know. I didn't. So when they did come, even though maybe there was times where I was like, this is going to end with me getting caught, and I hope so because I'm going to get clean off drugs. I thought that I'm going to go to jail for a period of time, and that's going to end up making me quit drugs because I can't do it on my own. That's my thinking at the time, is like, I'm going to use graffiti to save my life type thing. Well, when it happened, when they did come to my house, of course I went straight into like if I'm what am I going to do? Confess? Like, I'm still a writer. I'm still trying to get over. I'm still Like, I'm still me. And just because in complete desperation, I fantasized about the potential sobriety stemming from, like, it was almost like this wheel of like, oh, the graffiti's making me like careless because I'm like, fuck it. Like, and my relationship was fucked up. And the drugs were kind of like quenching, like, or quelling sort of maybe some of the pain, but like it was all like a ecosystem of like fucked upness. And it's funny because like a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, like I can't believe I'm fucking my life up by doing graph. But to me, the graph, even though it was subway graffiti and I knew the cops were coming, it was the only fucking thing I had I could attach to that wasn't completely without completely outside of my control or completely outside of beauty, you know? Um so then when they did come, I had severed ties with this toxic fucked up relationship, and on both sides I was using drugs secretly. I was mistreated potentially, and I was in a really complicated, like, psychological psychologically codependent, but also like abusive. I was self-harming by drug use. And so I'm definitely not making any sort of accusations towards anyone other than myself. I'm responsible for my actions, and I engaged in a relationship that was detrimental to me. And I engaged in behaviors that were detrimental to me. And I was failing to when I got raided also. So I was sort of funding maybe my lifestyle and um my substance abuse or substance consumption through, like, I was working tattooing, but I was also shoplifting a lot as well the whole time. And that was even recreation. At that point, that was just something I did. It was, but I was spending a lot of money on drugs. But when I got raided, the day I got raided, I came out of jail, and I was only in jail for a day because I was on methadone. And I actually they gave me promethazine at the hospital because if you're on methadone, they got to go check you before. And they gave me promethazine, which is just something for nausea. And when I went into the tombs, they asked me if I was on any medication, and I accidentally said I'm on Thorazine. And so they said, "Oh, he's a psych risk. He's got to go to court now." So I went straight into the tombs and straight to court and straight home out of a sheer mistake. I said the wrong name. Promethazine is just it's just a very slight stomach anti-nausea medicine. Often is mixed with, it's one of the ingredients in lean, but the opiate is the real active ingredient. So like it was just kind of a weird thing that I ended up not having to go through, like the like really shitty part of processing in the tombs, like a 24-hour like thing. And that was sheerly by accident, which was kind of cool. But after that case transpired, I didn't. I ended up getting just a citation, pleading guilty to a citation for trespassing, because the only thing they brought really to court was one photo of me, like my face unmasked, um, looking down the tracks, but I was standing on like a platform that wasn't like, it wasn't part of the writing. It was, you weren't supposed to be there. So I pled guilty to that in exchange for dismissal on everything else and a $3,000 fine. So the outcome of the case was very good. That was the first court appearance, no attorney. I was able to resolve the case. So that was perfect. Um, what I didn't resolve was the fact that when I went home, my eBay, coincidentally, the day I got out of jail for the graph, my eBay got uh zapped. Like I got banned from eBay, and nothing to do with the law or anything. It was just some kind of, basically they just like, I don't remember what it was, but it was nothing that could threaten me legally. It just, I lost my eBay account, so I didn't have the ability to make money. Was kind of bankrupted throughout the relationship that I was in through overspending and just careless choices. So now all of a sudden I'm addicted to drugs, and I'm unable to pay my rent. I'm reduced at my job tattooing, which was in Staten Island. I wasn't able to, like, I just started, the drugs and the crime started taking the front seat instead of the back seat. So even though I had beat the graffiti charges, and that couldn't, in any normal situation, that would have been great. It would have been behind me and we're all good. But I had the drug problem still. So I ended up, I was never like the drug user that like really, like, I wasn't like a suburban drug user where, I wanted to like meet some guy at the gas station and wait for an hour and then go home and like sit on the couch and get high. It was as much about the street as it was about the drugs to me. So I started going to Philly. Uh, it was a 2-hour bus from Lower Manhattan to Philly. And I went to this place, man. It was called Kensington. And like the first time I went there, like from New York, I took a bus because I was like, I had gotten some fentanyl, some heroin with fentanyl in it in Williamsburg projects over there, and I would have to wait for hours for this guy, and like he wouldn't want to serve me, and like I'd have to get some other fiend to, like, I'd have to pay him extra to cop for me, and it was just a fucking headache. And if this guy wasn't around, like no other heroin would touch me. Like and I knew right when I did it, I was like, damn, that shit is fucking, I wanted that product. It was called Godzilla. That was the type, that was the brand. It was from the projects right there on Bushwick and Grand. Um, and like when that wasn't around, I would get something else and do it. It just wouldn't do it. It wouldn't, I would still be sick. So I started taking the bus to Philly, and there was you get on the train and there's a stop called Somerset in Kensington, and it's on, and like I had never seen anything like it. I had been to Camden, I had been in the Tenderloin in San Francisco running amok. I had been in London, Camden, like full blown, like in the mix, and Kensington, this was different. This was like, it was like a playground of like, and there was people that they looked like me. I mean, they were kind of like skaters, and people you could tell were into like maybe like different like cultures and stuff. And there, but it looked like they like it looked like a concert venue, but it was on the street corner, and like down, there's guides that are like you waiting at the train, and when you get off, they're like, yo, I know where this stamp is, and this powder, and this, that, and this, I'll take you there, will you? And you get yourself a guide, and these people are like tour guides for Kensington. And there's like, it was seductive to a drug addict that likes the streets. This place was, this was top shelf hood shit. Like, and I went there, and so by Kensington standards, I was rich. I mean, I looked decent. I had I had a fucking, I'd go there with $600 or $800 that I made tattooing. I had, I was together, and I could tell that a lot of the people there were probably at one time like me, and maybe they got stuck. Somerset was like the Kensington beginner level. Later, I would venture into Allegheny, which was like the college of, if Somerset was like the high school, college was Allegheny and Kensington, K&A. So like the real grimy, like real bad shit was like down. And I didn't even go to Allegheny for the first like probably like 5 or 10 times I went. I would go down there on the bus from New York, but I did a lot of dumb things. I would tell people, "Oh, I'm a tattoo artist from New York," like, and show me what I'm pulling out my money. Now I'm looking back, I'm lucky I didn't get my ass fucking smoked day one doing that. Like with what I know now. But I found people that were like open, there's needles are passed out. People are selling what they call works, like is two for $1. Like that's how a lot of them, the more like down and out fiends make their money. There is like selling needles. They give them out. You get you return them and you get new ones, and then they sell them. So like I'm just like, holy shit, like this is crazy. This isn't like New York where I'm going in creeping into Brevoort projects on Fulton and Nostrand, at midnight, knocking on some guy's door, creeping out of there, going home or going to some fucking bathroom. This is like, I'm like at Disneyland as far as dope's concerned and as far as drugs are concerned. But even then I considered myself a tourist. I was like, I'm definitely not getting stuck here. And I was doing that for a while. And then like someone was like, and I was still dead set on like not I wasn't doing coke, so I was good. And then someone's introduced me to this thing they have there called powder, and it's not coke. They're like, it's not cocaine. And I put that in there, and like I knew I was already fucked, and I resorted back to like to I did what I thought I wouldn't do ever again, which was I put powder in there and made that mix. It was a wrap after that. I was that was the turning point for me where I was like, that was the mix that got me in trouble the first time. And so I started going. I still maintained because I would come to New York to start racking a lot and sell the stuff here. I had a buyer because after eBay got shut down, I started selling to a buyer. So I'd meet him up at 149th in the Bronx, and he'd take all this stuff, and I was getting good high end shit too. So like just whatever he would just give me a price, like he'd break it down, and I would sell it and go straight back. I would take the bus here, boost all the good shit, because New York was way, way, way better to boost, like to rack than Philly. Philly's hit. Like you're not getting away with like the type of shit like nah, like the Apple store and stuff like that in New York. There's 5 or 6 of them. There's a 24-hour Apple store at the time. 5th and 59th was my jam. I would go there, get iPhones. Not none of that like taking, cutting the cords and stealing the displays. I'm going like just slyly like getting on the side of the counter, like the boxed iPhones and stuff, Apple pencils, iPads, Bose QC35 headphones all day, like routing that shit like multiple spots a day. um so like money wasn't a problem, and I'm going back there with New York money, like I'm something special, I'm thinking. But then I ended up like things happen, like I end up taking a loss. Like I ended up getting arrested for shoplifting there at an Apple store. The dude took my money, took my iPad that was my personal one that I used for work for tattooing, which I had at that point like wasn't even doing. I skated on that. I just, well, I didn't, I felt it was disingenuous to be that fucked up on drugs and making tattoos. So I didn't go back. I quit. And this guy arrested me at the Apple store. I was taking 2 Apple pencils. That's $200. He ends up taking my iPad, putting it in a box, taking my $200 cash, and keeping it. And then so I didn't, and then charging me with the iPad theft and the all this shit and robbing me and getting me booked. I'm like, rob me and do all that, beat me up and all that, but then cut me loose. Like, don't do both. Like, are you a cop or a crook here? You know, that's when I realized Philly was different. Philly was something different. So I didn't. So I ended up I had like maybe like 100, maybe like $50, and that wasn't cutting it. And I was sick. I went to the. I got arrested for like 12 hours and got released, sick as fuck, withdrawing. Went straight to Kensington. Spent that money. Didn't have the bus for the fare to get home. And I ended up committing to like to the streets of Philly. And like I also was seduced by it. It wasn't just desperation. That was how New York fell out. But I was already decided on. I was already straight in the mix in Philly. And I but you know what? I found community. I didn't need to hide. I did not need to see my friends and conceal my usage. I didn't need to lie. I was in a environment where the purpose of this place was a congregation of drug addicts and people that wanted to sell them. There was block by block by block of different brands of drugs that were branded, stamped, logoed. There was like a sort of like verbal stock exchange type of daily update of what blocks were good, what blocks weren't, where you could get, and it was all based around fentanyl and powder. Mainly fentanyl, but most blocks, the blocks I went to had both. And so like, but that was beginner stuff. Then I got into like, oh well, this one is, you know, you just get into this like it's crazy because people I ended up, you know, being there for 5 years, many arrests. But I would get locked up with people that were selling. They were the other side. They were like, we would talk about the hood and be like, and they were just as addicted to the streets as I was, but they were on the trap. They were selling it. They were the ones that were addicted to whatever the fuck they got out of it. I was, and like you'd see someone from Kensington, like when I got arrested and I went to CFCF, that's the jail in Philly. And like, I was like, oh shit, like there's that guy, there's so-and-so, there's this dude. And we're sitting there, you know, comparing stories and talking about what blocks were hitting and what wasn't. And you see people that you bought from too. And it's crazy. Like there's a thing called the task force, like, where they would like be spying on blocks, like from like maybe an apartment window or a roof, and you wouldn't even see them. They're getting you copied. So if you're buying drugs, you're like 3 blocks away and they come up and scoop you in the van and take you and drive you off. And then after they get 3 or more people, then they can hit the block. So then they arrest everyone. And some of the guys, you'd see the dude get booked and then he's out there the next day. Like it was crazy. Like,
So you lived there on the street.
I never lived in Kensington on the street because it was so bad that like the people on the Ave, you know how like, I just want to address this too. Like public perception of Kensington is like zombie land. These like like trauma porn, like, people doing drive-by filming content about for shock value. Yeah, there are the mascots on the app that are folded over, dipped out. A lot of them probably haven't slept in weeks. A lot of them are under strong doses of xylazine and fentanyl mix, which, so let's just address that. Like, one thing I hated about Philly was like, because I was addicted to fentanyl when I went there, and that was that, and I got, definitely, that's what's there. There's no heroin really. There may be a couple blocks that are old school that still sell heroin, but dope is what they call it, and that's fentanyl. But they put this thing called xylazine in it. It makes It's a tranquilizer, and the mix is euphoria, but like it's long acting. Because fentanyl's really short acting. You get like a really high peak, and then kind of like goes away. So like you get that, but then for longevity's sake, so that's where you get the people that are dipped out, folded over. I hated that fact about it. Is like I would try to find, so they call it trank. A lot of people were addicted. They would just be about the trank, but I feel like all the people that I was around were upright. They were active. They were more into fentanyl and powder. I don't know if the powder keeps you. It's the like, I can't explain it unless you're a drug user. Like, you might know what the benefits of the mixture is. To me, that from the first or second time I ever injected it was the mix. It was always those two. Um, but the xylazine, it's a problem. It makes it to where your blood pressure. It's a blood pressure suppressant that's so it just it lowers your blood pressure so much that you just, I mean, there was times where unintentionally, like, I would get a product that had a high xylazine percentage, and I would wake up in the middle of a fucking intersection with cars and traffic, and it's like you snap out of it, but you're still walking. But you're, and then you wake up and you're like, holy shit, like, and you don't. That's how people end up getting like taken advantage of, and it was a thing, like the zombie walking type shit. But that was like a very beginning of the Kensington experience thing for me. I wouldn't even consume drugs in Kensington after that, because I used to walk around all night when I first got there and sample this, sample that, like I was riding rides at a fucking amusement park. I was totally oblivious because everyone, people, there's a super regimented, like a super, there's a hierarchy. Like, each block is run by a set, and a set consists of someone serving, lookouts, like people waiting for their shift, and there's shifts. There's 3 shifts. There's it's Each set is like one block, and then the next one and the next one, and there's hundreds of them, and they all, you it's just, there's been a long running policy in Kensington of like running a tight ship for these sets, and like, because people they don't can't be afraid to go cop and consume and purchase your product. Branding is really um considered, and so is customer service. And don't even think about like doing some dumb shit on someone else's set. Like, you'll definitely get fucked up real quick. And I mean, even at the start, I remember being up, there was a far block, Lee and Somerset, that was like still on the Somerset side, which was like bad. But I remember going there, and I heard gunshots real close, and I was getting my stuff, and I turned the corner, and there's a guy like kind of like walking, and his head was just like he had just gotten shot. But I don't know, he didn't fall, but It reminded me of that Michael Jackson Thriller video with the zombies and stuff. Not because he was on drugs. He was shot in whatever bullshit they had going on. That was the first time I saw like something really like heavy like that. But I still then I knew I felt I was safe because I was a customer. I still felt like this this world was so regulated by its own peer by its own occupants that like or the people that ran. I felt like I was like I wasn't susceptible to the ills of Kensington in that way because I was a patron.
How did you get out of that?
I would get out of it by going so deep into this dynamic. I would fully exhaust the streets of Kensington and Philly. I would stay in Center City. I never answered that question. I would stay in Center City. Um, I was really good at on the streets. Sorry, I just realized there's more to this story than getting out didn't happen yet. Um, I I was good at finding. I found community within Kensington, but I found a small core group of people who I felt were like minded to me that seemed like they had sort of because I was like, if I'm gonna be a drug addict, I'm gonna go be the best one I can, you know, like. And I found other people I think maybe that were kind of like that they knew me from boosting. They call it boosting, racking, making money, whatever. And like I remember because in by Allegheny, like once let's go back to like now daytime where I start being there during all in the day. Like I figure out how to work Kensington fully. I'm at Allegheny. I'm around. I'm going, walking miles and miles to get the best product because I didn't want to waste my money on the main blocks. Like there's streets called Reach, Custer, and Weymouth that are like the big three Allegheny blocks that are they've been there for 20, 30 years, holding it down, $1 million blocks. And when I say million, that's probably like a week, like maybe I don't know, I don't even know, but like I know that those primary blocks were the big ones because they were close. You kids, people coming from all over different places could go straight there. But I start navigating so well through there. I would say I'll skip a lot of the street talk, but like at one point, like I was in Center City. I was actually on 34th and uh and the whole time I'm floating my entire economy by shoplifting, and not the level like how it was in New York. We're going to like wherever, and I'm still getting mostly electronics and stuff. But then COVID hit, looting started, and when I didn't really participate in rioting too much, um, but a lot of the stores down Center City, they were just open. The windows were broken, the alarms were going off, and the back doors were ajar for weeks. And that was a phase because we lost all of our retail theft. We couldn't steal because COVID shut down all the stores. We were relying on like essential like drugstore type shit and like a few other stores. But then that George Floyd kicked off, the city went crazy. And I remember like being down there, and there's no trains leaving Kensington. I'm stuck in Kensington, and I knew that the Somerset station was closed at that point. I knew how to get into this locked in part where no one could get to me. So like I stayed in there the first day of the George Floyd riots in Philly, and there was army tanks. There was an army tank rolling down Kensington Avenue, shoot with the turret, shooting tear gas, and I'm on the second story, so I'm eye level with this guy, National Guard guy, driving a fucking army tank down Kensington Ave, and I'm consuming my drugs. Like this shit was crazy. Like so, like COVID happened, so that was the time frame. So you got to imagine the world shut down anyway, and I'm kind of like, damn, I picked a crazy time to like exit society and go to the fucking trenches, because like no one knew what was going to happen at the time, you know. So I would say, but I was good at finding places. I had Center City. I had a spot like, um, there was a bookstore like on 34th, near 34th and Market in Philly on Penn University campus. And now I looked it up, and it had been there for 60 years. It was like a really super monumental like bookstore called Penn Book Center that had been there for a super long time, and it had just closed. And I happened to be up there shoplifting in the area, and I noticed the door was open, unlocked, and it was starting to get cold. So like I went and got my friends that I was teaming up with, that we would shoplift together, and we would watch each other's backs. And I brought a very, very select few of them. It was 6 people. And this place was so awesome. It had a balcony, full electricity, bathroom, running water, like a hot plate, carpet, a balcony in the heart of University of Penn. And it's funny because it was like a few blocks away from the ICA, the Institute of Contemporary, the Philadelphia Institute of Contemporary Art, where street market. I had been to Philly. The only other time was I met Nemel there, Agua there, at the street market show where Todd James, Espo, and Barry McGee had a show there, and I went to Philly for the first time. This bookstore was a block from that, so I would see that all the time, thinking about my former life. And now I'm like out there, like, but it was a really golden moment for me to have that bookstore. For 4 months we occupied the place, day in and day out, and blended in as students coming through the I put a zip tie on the back door so it couldn't shut all the way. So like we had the spot, didn't tell anyone. It was very, very, the first time in the history of like street shit where something actually stayed secret, and it lasted the whole time. And then we didn't lose it until the Radio Kismet, which is the new occupants, came in to start setting up, and we never got apprehended, and it was fucking awesome. Like, so that was like the peak time for me in Kensington, was that. And then I ended up segueing into like, that just kept going, when you're full throttle to like street life and drug use and crime. There's not a lot of wave. I ended up incarcerated for a year during that time. Came out, went straight to the streets immediately again for another year and a half. And I ended up getting a stomach virus, E. coli, which this was December 29th of 2023, the New Year's Eve. Or December 31st, whatever, New Year's, whatever day that was. But I knew something was wrong. I wasn't sick yet, but I knew something was weird. Like, it was just, I could tell the last time I consumed drugs, I could tell something was a little bit off. And the next day I woke up, and there was like, I was unable to get off the ground. And someone called an ambulance, and I went to the hospital. They said, I was so underweight from lifestyle choices. I could not hold. I was shut down with E. coli. It's really bad. It's but I had no experience with it. But I got they took me to the hospital, and I sat there for 2 weeks, bedridden. They were just trying to get me well. And the whole time they were, I think they thought maybe that once I got a little bit of health, I would leave the hospital to go use drugs. because they obviously knew I was, a drug addict. And I um they offered to give me maintenance drugs like Suboxone or methadone, and I had already been on that, and I knew this was my chance. I was so sick with the I was so physically sick from not even considering the withdrawal, that the withdrawal on top of it didn't seem that bad. Where it was the worst thing ever in the world before, but now I was so sick that I was like, fuck it. Double down on this. I'm gonna ride this out. And then it took 2 weeks. Then I one of the people that was living in the bookstore, this girl, she was like my really close friend on the street for 2 years. Like, it was like we were together, like not in a romantic way, but we were constantly together. And she had gotten clean a little before me. She actually got arrested with me when I did the year. She did a couple months, and she got out and got herself clean. And the phone rang in the hospital, and no one knew shit about me. But I saw one guy when I was just got out the ambulance, and I said, "Yo, like, I'm sick. Like, I'm gone. I'm going." And then she called me. So that word got to her. She called me to find out that I was okay. She said she heard that I died, like, from another one of our friends. And so, like, she said, "Look, she was working in harm reduction in Philly, helping people. So she's like, "I'm gonna get you a bed in rehab. So once you get out of the hospital, you're gonna go to you need professional help. Like, if you wanna, you have to." So I kind of took her experience, as she was one of the only people I seen survive Kensington. So I was like, whatever she's doing, it's working. So I'm gonna listen to her. And so I got into a place called Valley Forge. They came and picked me up, and I stayed there for 2 weeks. And then one of my good friends that I knew from California, from like the late SF days, that I had uh, continuously maintained friendship with, was GK from uh, LA, which is MSK and AWR. GK, he lives in Philly. He came and picked me up at rehab, and I was so weak. I was sober, and I was so happy. I was 30 days clean the day that he picked me up, but still so weak. Like, it was hard for me to even try to do it in rehab. I had these tags that were like, and I went into rehab clean. I was like, but like I needed to get the I needed to be programmed, and like, it all was. I know that for me, like, going from the streets to rehab wasn't an option, but so I can't even take credit for my sobriety. I can take credit for continuing my sobriety, but me getting sick was like a blessing from the universe. Like, the fact that I was unable to get off the ground to keep continuing drug use was such a monumental blessing to me. I I fantasized about sobriety. You know, People getting high and plotting their sobriety is just so common. Fantasizing about one day I might, and trying, sometimes I try to explain to people, like, "Oh, I used to do this," and the close friends of mine knew. And when I went to Kensington, I was anonymous. Like, I loved the fact that no one knew anything about me, except that I was the guy from New York or from California, whatever version they wanted to listen to. However I explained it, they would call me either New York or Cali. Like, that was kind of like my thing. And but it wasn't until people started coming up to me and being like, "Oh, you're gray." Like, they started, because there was writers, there was people that were not even writers, but people that were just, that kind of knew about things. And so I lost my anonymity. But like, the reason I brought that part up is that like I was so mad because I was like, I just want to be left alone. I just want to be um anonymous. I want to just be like you guys. But then when I got clean, I had nothing. I had no possible recourse for rebuilding. I had no starting point. And through like GK, kind of, I made a little Instagram, and I was like, kind of like, just so my intention for making Instagram was, hey guys, I'm not dead. And within a few days, like GK had the like wherewithal to like get me, a pile of supplies. And he's like, yo, fill these stickers out. Like, and he put out like a little post about me selling some artwork, some sticker packs, and like within like a couple days, I mean, like I was able to have the money to like get an apartment, and to I started going to meetings day one. Right when I came out the rehab, I started going to Narcotics Anonymous and AA, because I was doing multiple a day. I wanted to do it all, like sobriety, like all that. Like I needed it, because I went from being entrenched in pure chaos. So I needed to get entrenched in a solution. And I I would listen to people sharing in my meetings a lot about their struggles, and I just realized how like I have such a solid community of people who are supportive and who accept me despite my struggles, and that, I mean, are offering me like, I thought I was gonna get made fun of for like fucking up again, or for whatever. And like instead, people are like, they reached out and purchased these like little artifacts from me, that like each one of those purchases like help me stabilize myself. And it's created like, I mean, I'm going on like 1 year of sobriety. At January 1st, that's the last day I used was New Year's Eve. So New Year's Day is my 1 year mark. And the I mean, the programs I'm in, Narcotics Anonymous and AA, they promise that life will get better, and it does. And I would really, I feel like, a lot of my friends, that like the person that helped me get into a facility, she does harm reduction, hands on, direct, in Kensington, still helping people, trying to get people into rehab, but and passing out like necessities. To me, service work is vital to recovery. We can only keep what we have by giving it away. That's kind of the motto. But like for me, I feel like being genuine and honest about my story, and offering example of like succeeding in sobriety, I feel like I might have a stronger hand in doing that, and in continuing my story as a form of harm reduction and service work within substance abuse recovery. So that's one of the main motivators for me being so candid with like some of the pitfalls of my behaviors, is to let people know that like there wasn't a whole lot of depths that addiction can take you that I didn't experience besides death. And I made it out. And it's because of the community that I've forged and built throughout my history doing this craft that has offered me a helping hand and supported me and given me like the hope of like succeeding. And if I can reach anyone that might be struggling in the beginning stages or whatever, wherever the depth of this they are, it, recovery is possible. And I would like, people, I'm, hit me up. I mean, anyone struggling, like I can definitely give you the right direction to like, I mean, I can't save anyone, but what I can do is give you the the sort of blueprint for how I'm doing it, and I can promise that it works. So like, I don't know. That's I think that's the message. That's sort of like my purpose kind of right now with being here. Is not being here, but just being existing is like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, dude, uh, very insightful story. I came up going hardcore shows,
Okay.
hardcore punk shows. That was a huge part of my identity for a long time. And with that came like just like straight edge. I got really into straight edge bands. So I think the very first straight edge band I ever became aware of was this band called Have Heart.
Mm.
There was this like Have Heart, and then I became aware of like this was before veganism, like Youth of Today,
Oh
and
yeah.
all
Me too. I love. That's the funny thing.
yeah.
High school, like I loved all Youth of Today, Gorilla
Yep.
Biscuits, Judge.
Yep. So I've never done anything. You know, I grew up skating too, and like kids would have beers and kids would have weed, and it's like try the beer, try the weed. But because I was like going to hardcore punk shows as well, it was like an out. Like no one was like, "Oh, you're whack because you don't do it." It was just like an out. So I say that to say I have no experience doing anything. And hearing your story and what you've been through and how you've dealt with it and come out on the other side, like I'm one of those people who I've just seen YouTube videos of Kensington, you know what I'm saying? Like I only know like the fucking whatever clickbait shit that I
Mm-hmm.
see. Um I've been to like SF and like the parts of SF where there's like tons of drugs and shit, and same thing like Skid Row in LA and all that stuff. But just as a passerby,
Yeah.
hearing about your story and what you went through and how it's really, I'm not going to say like, but maybe it is like destiny that some of these bad things that happened, such as like the E. coli or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, ended up, there's a yin yang effect to it. And something I noticed that you kept saying throughout this interview is like that, like the shittiest things that have happened to you, which was like essentially the addiction,
Mm-hmm.
was a necessary part of your overall evolution. And I think that's an important thing, not just for someone who's doing drugs, but also just like people in general. Because there's always good in everything bad that happens to us. There's always bad and a little bit of bad and something good that happens to us too. So I think that realizing that is easier said than done. And I think that realizing it when the shit that you went through was so OD, is pretty, it's like nice to hear, so um yeah, this is my first time meeting you, but
Mm-hmm.
growing up, before I knew about like just hearing whispers through the graffiti community about what you were going through,
Mm.
I knew about your graffiti just because I knew about your graffiti, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As a fan of graffiti, as someone writing graffiti, and all my friends, like it was always like gray, gray, gray. um and I was always a huge fan of your graffiti and everyone that you wrote with and all that shit. And then I remember starting this thing maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
We started this podcast, this thing that we do, and we were like, oh, yo, we should fucking, we just had like, we didn't really have any big plans, but we were like, what are some ill ass people that we could have on that we came up on? Like, we came up looking at their
Mm.
shit. And that's really what this thing is like what me and my friends came up looking at. One of the first ones was like, oh, great, we got to get Gray on. We got
Mm.
to get Gray on. So I go and I look like, and then I'm like, damn, doesn't seem to be that active on Instagram. I'm like, I don't know how the fuck I'm gonna reach out to him. At the time, I didn't know Hurt, and I didn't know anyone who I didn't have any mutuals with you. So I'm like, fuck. I'm like, all right, whatever. Maybe I'll send him a DM or whatever. So I sent you a DM on the Gray PVC account. I
Yeah.
think it's gray.pvc
Yes.
with a check mark and like all the tattoo stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, we'll let that shit rock. And then nothing happened. And then I'm like, maybe like a year or two later, I was like, let me try again because fuck it. So I tried again. Obviously, you were not gonna see that shit with like all the shit you're
Dude,
telling
I don't
me.
even that. Just about that account, just
Yeah.
real quick, like that shit. I didn't. I like didn't have a phone. I don't know the password. I don't even remember. That shit's forever. And like I didn't even want to see what all the other people when I disappeared. But that's crazy. I never even knew you reached out to me like
Yeah.
during that time.
Yeah. So then through somehow in life, this shit ends up happening.
Mm-hmm.
At the time that it ends up happening, which is probably the right time. And it's been really sick for me just as as a bystander, like hearing your story. Because like I feel like although graffiti is relevant and graffiti is important, there's like a lot of I guess quote unquote graffiti interviews out there.
Mm.
And they're sick and like they're awesome to listen to and all that and like take nothing away from them, but your story has a lot of there's a big human element to your story of like overcoming struggles, dealing with like tremendous fucking adversity
Mm.
in life, points in life where like I'm sure seems like it would be impossible to come back from. And then you do it. So then like that to me is extremely an important message to get out there because that's something that no matter what you're going through, people can relate to that shit and be like, oh, like things are possible, like of like great magnitude, and you never know what the fuck is gonna happen and what bad thing might end up being some sort of freedom. So I want to say, thank you for doing this, speaking super openly, and yeah, man, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, there's something to be said for like I feel like I used to be like emotionally driven too much where it was almost debilitating like as far as wanting to succeed. And like now I feel like I overcame like the biggest struggle ever. And like so now like making art or making music or things that I was so like scared or nervous about turning out the right way. Now it's all okay. Everything's fine. Like I'm just making artwork and making things and creating and whether or not it necessarily turns out the way I planned, that's okay because I've 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 had this huge challenge that eclipses all of the stress that I had previously. And now I feel like I've been liberated in ways and I don't know. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share my story and to be given a platform in which others might be able to appreciate it. And I think it happened at the right time.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, 100%, man. Thank you, and just wishing the best for you going forward with everything that you're doing. And I hope for your continued sobriety. And I hope a lot of people listen to this. I think a lot of people will listen to this. I think that's just the nature of the internet, plus like a story that's meaningful, and those two things combined tend to spread. So I'm stoked, and yeah, thank you, bro.